What if I told you your biggest breakthrough is hiding behind your smallest steps? That progress, no matter how tiny, is the most powerful force you can harness today. Welcome to Mind Hackers, where neuroscience meets hustle and belief becomes your greatest asset. Today, we're unpacking a powerful truth. The only way to fail is to stop moving. Perfection is a myth. It's a polished lie that convinces you not to start. We wait to feel ready, to have the perfect plan, or to know exactly what we're doing. And while we wait, life moves on. But here's the truth. Perfection is the lowest standard you can aim for. Why? Because it doesn't exist. Chasing it keeps you frozen. Let's look at the iPhone. The first model, no app store, no front-facing camera, no copy and paste. But Steve Jobs released it anyway, not because it was perfect, but because it was ready enough to grow. That imperfect phone revolutionized the way we live. Sarah Blakely started Spanx with $5,000 and zero experience in fashion or business. Her prototype? Cut up pantyhose. It wasn't sleek, and it definitely wasn't perfect, but it worked. She kept going. Today, she's built a billion-dollar brand. Or James Dyson. 5,126 failed vacuum prototypes. Most people quit after 5. He pushed through thousands of failures to reach one breakthrough. That's not perfection. That's progress through grit. You don't need to be perfect. You need to begin. And once you begin, you build belief. Because every expert you look up to once stood exactly where you are. Uncertain, unprepared, and full of doubt. What changed everything? They started anyway. Progress is the most underrated superpower you have. The brain is hardwired to crave certainty. It wants to know where you're going, how long it will take, and whether it'll be safe. But progress doesn't come from certainty. It comes from motion, forward movement. Even when it's small, it builds momentum, and momentum builds confidence. Imagine pushing a heavy car stuck in mud. At first, it doesn't budge, but with a few strong pushes, it starts to rock. Then, with one last shove, it moves. That's how progress works. It feels invisible at first, but each effort counts. Each step matters. Until suddenly, you're moving, and it's hard to stop you. Too many people underestimate the small wins. They think progress has to be big to be meaningful. But science disagrees. Studies in behavioral psychology show that even micro wins, like checking a box, completing a module, showing up on a hard day, they trigger dopamine, the reward chemical. That release wires your brain to want to do it again. So the more consistent you are, the more your brain builds a habit of belief. In fact, neuroscience tells us that the brain is a prediction machine. Every time you succeed, even in a tiny way, your brain updates its module of what's possible. That's neuroplasticity at work. Each repetition rewires the brain, making future action easier and faster. This is how progress shifts from conscious effort to automatic behavior. Research from Stanford and Harvard also support this. People who track their progress, no matter how small, are significantly more likely to reach their goals. Why? Because when you see evidence of forward motion, it creates a feedback loop of motivation. That's the science behind the spiral of success. Think about it. No one trains for a marathon by running 26.2 miles on day 1. They run a mile, then 2, then 5, and progress builds up. Your capacity is getting higher and higher. And capacity builds belief. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to commit to forward motion, no matter how small it feels today. To sustain long-term momentum, you need these 3 unshakable beliefs. Number 1, you have to believe the treasure is out there. The life you want, the freedom you crave, it exists. Number 2, you have to believe you will find it. You don't know how yet, but you trust that your persistence will carve the path. And number 3, you have to believe it's worth it. The discomfort, the doubt, the grind, it will all be worth it through that outcome. These 3 beliefs aren't just motivational, they're neurological. When you believe the goal is real, your brain releases dopamine in anticipation, not just when the goal is reached, but when you feel it's within reach. That dopamine sharpens focus, increases drive, and energizes action. When you believe you'll find a way, your brain activates the problem-solving part, known as the front midline of the brain, including a section called the anterior cingulate lute cortex. It helps you notice what's not working and finds ways to adjust. It keeps you alert, flexible, and focused on the solutions. And when you believe it's worth it, you engage the brain's reward and motivation systems, the same ones involved in long-term goals and decision-making. This shifts your whole perception of the effort from pain to purpose. With those 3 beliefs wired into your mindset, your chances of success dramatically increase, not just psychologically, but biologically. Growth doesn't happen in a straight line. You'll rise, hit a wall, you'll rise again, and you'll stumble. But over time, your trajectory climbs. And here's where most people go wrong. They make the mistake that a plateau is known as a failure. They hit a slow patch and assume it's the end. But neuroscience tells us that plateaus are where deep learning happens. When you first learn something new, it's exciting. Dopamine flows freely. You feel fired up. But once the novelty fades and you reach a plateau, your brain starts consolidating knowledge. This is the back-end work of mastery. It's quiet, it's frustrating, but it's essential. In fact, research on skill acquisition shows that plateaus are often precede breakthrough moments. It's called the learning curve dip. Right before a major improvements, there's a lull, a silent phase where your brain is rewiring, pruning old neural pathways, and strengthening new ones. If you stop here, you interrupt the process. But if you push through it, even just showing up, even when it feels pointless, you come out on the other side faster, stronger, and sharper. This is how elite performers train. Athletes, musicians, Navy SEALs, they all understand that consistency during the dip is what separates amateurs from masters. It's not about avoiding the struggle. It's about embracing it with the mindset, this is part of the process. So when you hit that moment where nothing seems to be working, don't panic. That's not the end. That's the rewire. You have to go back to basics, review the fundamentals, re-immerse, re-engage, and most importantly, keep going. Because every action you take is driven by a feeling, and every feeling is shaped by a belief. That's the chain reaction most people miss. If you're procrastinating, avoiding, or freezing, it's not a motivation problem. It's a signal, a sign that something deeper is out of alignment. Let's break it down this way. That energy is emotional. Whether it's drive, courage, urgency, or determination, emotion is the gas pedal. Without emotion, your brain doesn't prioritize action. But emotion doesn't just appear. It builds on belief. What you believe about yourself, your future, and what's possible creates the emotional state you live in. And those states either move forward or keep you stuck. Now, neuroscience confirms this. The limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, activates based on perceived meaning. If you believe your effort won't matter, your brain won't create the emotional surge needed to act. But if you believe your action will make a difference, even a small one, the system lights up. You feel motivated, inspired, you feel clear. So if you're struggling to follow through, just ask yourself better questions. Do I believe my action today matters? Do I believe the goal is possible for me? Do I believe I'm capable, even if it's messy? When you change what you believe, you change how you feel. And when you change how you feel, action becomes natural, not forced. So the next time you hit resistance, don't just push harder. Take a pause, zoom out, and look at the belief behind the feeling. That's where the real rewiring begins. Mastery doesn't just show up all at once. It shows up in layers. It's built in the repetition, in the return, in the days you don't feel like it, but you show up anyway. Look, consistency isn't sexy, but it's transformative. Every time you come back to the work, you reinforce new neural pathways. You're literally rewiring your brain to respond differently, with more clarity, confidence, and capability. So what does that look like practically? Let's say you're enrolled in a program or a course. Maybe it's related to your business, health, mindset, or skill development. Don't binge watch it like Netflix and expect results. Instead, set a pace that fits your life and your attention span. For example, you could commit to watching one video lesson per day and applying just one insight. Or maybe 3 focus modules per week, spaced out so your brain has time to digest and reflect. Or you block off weekends to go deep, what we call immersion learning, where you spend 2 to 3 hours soaking in knowledge and doing the work. There's no perfect formula. What matters is that you find your own rhythm and then stick to it. The brain thrives on rhythm. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity builds fluency. And fluency eventually becomes part of your identity. Suddenly, you're not someone learning discipline. You are someone who lives it. So whether you're just starting or just starting over, remember, mastery isn't a finish line. It's a mindset, a daily decision to move forward, even when it's inconvenient. Show up, do the work, let the rhythm shape the results. Growth favors those who prepare. And preparation isn't just about strategy. It's about anticipation. Leaders don't just react to what's happening. They develop the foresight to see what's about to happen and position themselves ahead of it. But how do you anticipate something you've never experienced before? Well, you borrow wisdom. You collapse time by learning from those who've already walked the path you're trying to carve. This is why mentorship and modeling matter so much. When you invest in learning from others, books, courses, live events, masterminds, you're not just gaining information, you're actually absorbing perspective. You're seeing how high performers think, how they respond under pressure, how they adapt when the unexpected hits. Imagine walking through a dense forest with no path in front of you. That's what entrepreneurship, self-mastery, or any big transformations can feel like. Now imagine someone comes along and says, I've been through this exact forest. I've mapped the trail. I know where the cliffs are, where the shortcuts live, and how to get through faster. Now that's the power of guidance. Mentorships, they're not weaknesses. It's a strategy. It's leverage. And in a world moving this fast, especially with AI, constant innovation and global competition, trying to figure out everything on your own just isn't noble. It's inefficient. So whether it's a coach, a course, a community, or even a curated curriculum, find someone who's further down the road than you. Ask better questions. Apply their mental frameworks. Apply what works. because the people who adapt the fastest aren't always the smartest. They're the ones who learn from experience, even if it's not their own. Look, you're not supposed to have it all figured out. You're not supposed to be expecting to feel confident every step of the way. But here's what is expected of you: to move, to keep going. Because clarity doesn't come from action. Confidence doesn't come from commitment. Those things come from doing. So when in doubt, act. When it feels messy, move. When progress seems invisible, just keep going. Rewire your brain with forward motion. Build belief through daily discipline. And never forget, success without fulfillment is just achievements without meaning. You're here to live, not just to win. If this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Mind Hackers, hit the bell so you're the first to know when we drop something new. Leave a comment below. What part of this hit home for you? Let's grow together.